One early noon, McIntosh was working at the farm with his sister Applejack. Applejack was in the barn taking care of stacking some boxes of some apples while he was at the apple orchards when he suddenly hears music. First he thought he must have heard something wrong, but the music continued. But it was a little bit distant. He couldn't even specify for what type of music instrument they were, but as he started to follow the music, it came actually from the farm itself. And as he was getting closer, he was then very closely enough and he recognized it was guitar music. And he thought, is Applejack taking a break and playing guitar again? She has done that at least once before, but it was about a year ago. As he do followed the sound, and he walked around the corner of a hail ball, and he's seeing it was a pony, but not Applejack, but a stallion by the name Singing Note. Singing Note and Big McIntosh were good friends. Singing Note actually were from Ponyville, but he left Ponyville about a year ago. He had been he wanted to explore the kingdom, and he wanted to be a musician, a traveling musician. So he had been traveling around the kingdom for the past year. And even though that Big Macintosh can sometimes get a letter or a postcard from his friend, but they actually very good friends, and he was surprised to see that Singing Note was at the farm playing guitar without having even informed Macintosh that he would be arrived there. As he was just standing there listening to his music and his singing. Singing Note didn't notice that he was staying there, but he continued to playing and singing for at least another 5 minutes, and when he stopped, Macintosh just looked at him and asked, Singing Note, what are you doing here, of all places? I thought you were somewhere else by now. After all, you told me you were going to on travel. But Singing Note said, Ah yes, I was on a travel, but I wanted to see how my family were, and I decided to go home for a visit. And you didn't tell me, at least by a letter or a postcard. No, I want to be as a big surprise. But there was something that Macintosh came up with that felt that. Why did it even be Applejack came out from the barn if Singing Note was there playing guitar and singing? And it turned out Applejack was aware of his arrival. So she pretended that she didn't even hear the music at all, or that she was too busy to listen. But Macintosh, he wasn't even upset about that. He was just more of a little bit surprised that his best friend had come back to Ponyville after some time. But since Macintosh was had all taken care of his chores, he decided to take with Singing Note inside home to eat something and want to hear all about his travels. He had been traveling around the kingdom all this by himself. He had traveled to some like Manhattan, Canterlot, Trottingham, Manhattan, so many different places. And he wanted to know more about those places than that he's been to. Even though that singing note, he was actually happy to be telling Big Macintosh all about his time of traveling at his performance. And then though Big Mac asked him if there was something about his if he had any place that he preferred the most. Or if any place that he could just choose from. And there was only one place that he had one place that he preferred to be with. Ponyville, his home. After that, he decided to maybe stay in Ponyville for a little bit while to maybe to try to spend time with him and his family before he was gonna go back on his travel again. And even though the Big Mac had been offered by Signal once before to join him, after all, Big Mac has a great tone of singing after all since he's part of Ponytones. But since he declined the offer because he did have to stay at the farm to help around, since Grant Smith gets older and Applejack cannot take care of the farm by himself with Apple. And since Big Mac has been part of the farm since he was very young, which Singing Note did understood. But he had another proposal. What if that he could stand up, perform with Big McIntosh at the town center for entertainment for other ponies? That he could agree to do. They decided to do so on the next day. But unfortunately, that never happened because McIntosh had a lot of work to take care of that work that day. And seeing note, he had to be spending more time with his parents. After all, he has been away for about a whole year by then. They want to know more about his travels and if he had met any special song pony on the travels. And but he had always said to his parents that he would have met the right mare at when the moment came. After all, McIntosh and Singnote has been actually being friends ever since they were just colts. They went to the same school together. Even at around when they were about 20 years old, it was then Singnote wanted to be a musician. He was already good at playing guitar at a young age, but he wanted to be something more. After hearing stories about travelers, and he wanted maybe to see more about the kingdom. And when he was 20, he decided to be a traveler musician. His parents wasn't even was actually supportive of his idea. He promised the king can still remain in contact with his parents as often as he could by sending letters and even telling them how he feels when he returned home like that. And his travels went perfectly. And the next day after that, he had been spent time with his parents and that Mick McIntosh was busy at the farm. They had decided to go to this town center and they started to performing. Singing Note started playing his guitar and McIntosh started singing some of the songs he had used to sing with the ponytails. And ponies around them started looking at them to watch this performance and even after it was finished. Ponies were gradually was applying for them both. Even this was actually a good feeling for Macintosh. He hasn't even felt this good performing with Sing Note for about a year. He wishes his friend could stay a little bit longer though, but Singing Note had mentioned he was going to stay only for about a couple of weeks before he's going back out for his travel again. But this time, Macintosh has once again been offered to join him. Even though that Macintosh said that he would think about it. But Singing Note has already had already imagined the answer would be no. But the same afternoon, around when Macintosh came back home to the farm, he was still thinking about if he would go back with Singing Note. Even though he that same evening during dinner he mentioned this performance about his family when he did singing and that Singing Note played his guitar. His family heard about it, and they said that he actually was enjoyed that he had a good time with his friend. But then he said that he had been offered by Singing Note to join him on his travel to see around Equestrian perform like when he usually did. And his family was not expecting that. He said, I actually have to say I am actually going to accept his offer. Both Applejack and Grant Smith almost shook on the dinner and looked at him. Wait, Applejack, Big Mac, are you serious? Said Applejack. Yeah, actually, ma'am. But Granny Smith was just silent and said, are you really sure about this, Big Mac? Yes, Granny, I am sure. How long will you be away? Said Applebloom then. Hard to tell. Maybe a year, maybe half a year. I don't know. It depends from it's up to Sing note, but I will ask him tomorrow. But if you will be away for a whole year, how will be the farm being out to? You will be fine, Applejack. I know you can handle this. And if you need help, you can ask your friends. I know that they will be able to help you. And after all, how much I've been able to been doing things for myself for once. Even that Applejack realized that Big McIntosh had a point. Applejack had been traveling around the question for herself many times, and even Apple Bloom for a couple of times. But Big Mac, he has never been traveling so much as often. He was wanted to be able to see parts of the Quested Kingdom himself. He has only been heard stories and even passed some seen pictures in the newspaper from perhaps from Trottingham, Baithad, and other places. So his family supported that his decision. So the next day, McIntosh told Signal that he would join him, but even asked him how long they would be gone. And as usually he said, about a year, or 6 months at most. 6 months, said McIntosh. I thought they would be gone for a year. No, this time I'll only decide to be 6 months. You see, after that I went back here to Ponyville to stay with my family a little bit longer. Alright, when will we leave? By on Friday, by train. Alright? 8 a.m. so normally? Yep. Right then. So Big McIntosh went back to the farm and informed his family that he will leave on Friday. And they were a bit surprised also about 6 months, but still, at least he would be a while to be able to travel himself with a friend to see more of the kingdom. And on Friday, Applejack, Applebloom, and Grant Smith were at the train station with Big Mac to say goodbye to him and hope that he has a good time on his travels. Even on the train after they left them, Singing Note and Big Mac was talking about the travel to the next stop to be Trollingham, and from therefore it is unknown. For at least they had decided they were only wanted the fate to tell them where to go. And all they travel from one place to another. They travel from big city to small town to small villagers and to small farms performing, and everywhere they went, they had us a great time. Even though that Big Mac still missed his home, but he had a great time on his travels with his best friend. And after 6 months, they had returned back to Ponyville. Around this time, the fall had taken place. The autumn had once arrived. Big Mac was really happy to be home again, and his family was really happy and asked him how his travels been, where he's been, places, and he actually told them a lot of things. Had even mentioned in his letters where he had been and where next place to go and how this performance had been going on and that he loved this traveling. And then Applebloom asked, would you maybe go on more travels like this? Maybe longer? And even Applejack and even Granny Smith was also curious to know. But McIntosh said, yes, one day. But for now, I decided to stay here at the farm with my family. I know that 6 months is felt like eternity, but you know, half of a year has been a great time to spend time with my best friend and even be able to perform for others. But the things I miss the most is to be here with the ones that I love the most of all, my family. But but I probably will leaving sometimes maybe next year. But this time I will decide how long we will be gone. And I do hope at least we will be able to wait to at least the spring or in the summer, said Big Mac. And even though that Sing now decided to stay in town to at least the spring, he and McIntosh had an idea. What about they could perform sometimes in town center, like did that they did before 6 months earlier. And even singing out actually thought that could have been a great idea. They never actually played for being paid. They only performed to make others happy. And even singing note actually started even playing some music with the Ponytones performed when Big McIntosh worked there. And the Ponytones actually enjoyed that McIntosh has his friend playing guitar so they can perform not singing. One of the biggest performances was actually on the market only about a few days before Warming Eve. Even that was a big time for his friends. But even though McIntosh was really happy to know that his friends was back. A couple of months later, about in early June, Singing Note was about to leave to perform in a small town outside of Ponyville. But then something happened. One morning, when Singing Note woke up, when he was about to talk to his parents, he couldn't. He had lost his voice for the very first time, and he was freaking out because he had no idea what could have happened because he hasn't been singing or anything screaming for the past few days. So, and he wasn't even hasn't even been sick either for over a few months. So why does it happen to him? So they went to the doctor to see his throat was swollen, and when McIntosh went to talk to him, and he wasn't even aware about this. But when his Singing Note's mom told McIntosh that Singing Note had lost his voice, and he asked if he can see him, and she said yes, even though that Singing Note could even talk. But he could either say yes or no by me shaking head or nodded. And the only thing that McIntosh could come up with that maybe can help by go to Sakura. When he asked Singing Note about this, and he said yes, maybe there was a word to try. So they went to see Sakura, and sure enough, she was able to help Singing Note. But there was a one catch. It would take him at least 2 days to be full to gain back his full voice again. And that was actually something that he would have to wait for, which he didn't mind. So after all, he was not going to leave Ponyville for another week, so there would be enough time for him to be recover his voice and later on be able to perform again. But he was also forbidden to try to speak while he's taking this medicine. And even though the Singing Note wanted to be able to talk or try to sing, but luckily he agreed to do so. And after about a couple of days, the treatment worked. Singing Note had his voice back again. And it was close. He thought he would go crazy if he couldn't sing anymore because he loved to sing for others. And even after he gained back his voice, he told McIntosh, you are a great friend. You are the most truest friend that any pony can ask for. Hey, I can always help my friends, no matter what happens, begged McIntosh. But I mean it. You are my truest friend. I would have done anything to help you. You know that, right? Of course. That's what friends for. And that's what made them both true friends. Even despite knowing, even if that Macintosh had even went home to singing note, he maybe not had been able to get his own voice back earlier. He would probably have to cancel his performance in the neighbor town, which he would not have liked as much. Since his since he loved to perform in singing and playing guitar. But after that, he actually had invited not only Macintosh, but his family to this concert and this performance in neighbor town, which they all agreed. And it was free of charge. After all, after it was thanks to McIntosh that he was able to perform again. But even then, when they went to the small town, Singing Note actually had asked McIntosh if he wanted to perform with him, which McIntosh said yes. And the performance went from well to perfect. They, they both had such a great time. Even then, Singing Note once again had asked McIntosh if he wanted to go with him on another travel. But McIntosh said, not this time, but maybe next year. And the both agreed. And even they performed the last performance together before Singing Note decided to go on his travel again. But they promised to keep in touch by letters or postcards, which both agreed to do so since they did that before. And even though the next day, Sing Note and McIntosh said goodbye on the train before he left and said, well, it has been a great time, Sing Note. Yeah, it has. Maybe we will do this again next time. Perhaps. But let me know when you will be back home next time. Alright? I make a promise. And even though that McIntosh probably realized it might be a while since he will see his friend again. And next, who knows, maybe it will be another year, or maybe 6 months, or perhaps even earlier than that. But in his mind, Sing Note is his true best friend. And even if that had even helped him earlier, he would have lost his ability to perform and maybe had been counseled a lot more after performance later on. And in Sing Note's mind, having McIntosh as his friend, not only as his best friend, was the one that made him happy. Happy to have a friend, a true friend, as McIntosh. And that's how Big McIntosh and Sing Note became best friends. The end.